Yeah.
30 years before the legendary Sango would ascend to his throne of fire, the Oyo kingdom stood on the precipice of total annihilation. The air in those days was thick with the scent of smoke and the iron tang of blood. Oyo was locked in a brutal, soul-crushing struggle against the Tapas and the Bariba, warriors who were whispered to be as wild as the savanna winds and as dangerous as a wounded leopard. The people of Oyo lived in constant fear, viewing their northern neighbors not just as enemies, but as forces of nature that could not be tamed. To save his throne and his people, King Oranyan called upon his brother, the fierce King Ajagunla. Together, their combined armies broke the back of the resistance. Seeking to save what remained of his shattered kingdom, the Tapa king, Elempe, sent his daughter, Princess Tarosi, to Oranyan's court. She was not just a princess. She was a master of words and negotiation. Through her, a peace was brokered, and that peace was sealed in the royal bedchamber. From this union of rivals, 2 sons were born. The first was Ajaka, a child of quiet spirit. The second was Arabambi, named for the ancient, thunderous spirit of the clouds. But Arabambi was no ordinary child. Even in his cradle, there was a heat about him that the midwives could not explain. Queen Tarosi watched her son with a mixture of motherly awe and a creeping, holy terror. When the boy reached 5 years of age, the truth of his nature could no longer be hidden. One afternoon, while the queen was busy in the royal kitchens, she noticed the young prince watching the fireplace with an intensity that seemed to pull at the very embers. Suddenly, as if answering a silent command, the flames leapt from the hearth and coiled into Arabambi's small, outstretched hands. He did not scream. He did not burn. Instead, he laughed, molding the raw fire into a glowing, pulsating orb as if it were a common clay toy. His eyes, usually dark and inquisitive, burned a brilliant, terrifying crimson, and his breath came out in thick, rolling clouds of white smoke. Tarosi stood frozen, a wooden spoon slipping from her hand. She knew then that her son carried the primordial fire of the gods within his marrow. Seeking the wisdom of the ancients, Tarosi took Arabambi to the sacred city of Ile-Ife, to the presence of Agbomirigun, the great Ifa priest. The atmosphere within the grand temple was heavy with the weight of centuries. The air smelled of incense, old stone, and the divine. Agbomirigun, a man whose eyes seemed to see into the tomorrow of all men, cast his opele shells upon the Opon Ifa. He chanted the Odu Ifa in a melodic, powerful voice that vibrated through the very floorboards. When the priest finally looked up, his expression was grave, his face etched with the burden of his vision. He pointed a trembling finger at the young prince. "Olori Tarosi," he whispered, "this child shall be called Sango. He is the incarnation of the great spirit of thunder. He will be a deliverer of his people, a king whose name will outlive the stars. But his path is one of storms and betrayal." The priest then did the unthinkable. He removed his hat and prostrated himself before the 5-year-old boy. But his warning to Tarosi was sharp. When the boy reached 7, he was to be taken far to the north, to the Nupe highlands, to train with the monks of the Sun Table in the secret temple of Sara. "You must never visit him," Agbomirigun warned. "The temple is guarded by the weeping gargoyles. They are ancient demons that consume any uninitiated soul who dares to approach the gates twice. To save his life, you must lose him." 3 decades passed like a long-drawn breath. In the Nupe kingdom, the market square of the capital was alive with the pulse of the Bata drums. the double-headed instruments that speak the language of the gods. In the center of a roaring crowd, a man moved with a grace that defied the laws of the earth. This was Sango, the Prince of Oyo, now a man of towering stature and immense presence. He had spent his youth in the secret temple of Sara, mastering the secrets of Osiris and the 256 Odus of Ifa. As his drummer, Ayandele, hammered out a frantic, hypnotic rhythm, Sango began his dance. It was a ritual of power. "Arabambi Akoni!" Ayandele shouted, his voice rising above the drums. "Lord of thunder and master of fire, bearer of the secrets of the ancient stones." Suddenly, Sango's eyes blazed like the midday sun. He launched himself into the air, performing gravity-defying rotations before hovering momentarily above the ground. He let out a roar that shook the surrounding stalls, and a spray of living fire and thick smoke erupted from his mouth and nostrils. The crowd recoiled in a mixture of ecstasy and dread. Women clutched their children, and men cheered until their throats were raw. But the performance was interrupted by the arrival of three weary riders.
Carried discipline from secret
Sango told them of Bako, a demon awakened in the swamp. In the depths where lightning cannot reach, he fought it with steel.
Even as a child, Arabambi listened to the sky like it was speaking directly to him. When a mother meets the unknown in her own child, she seeks the oldest wisdom.
At their head was the Bashara of Oyo, the kingdom's high chancellor. He brought news that tasted of ash. Sango's brother, King Ajaka, had been captured by the Owu kingdom during a cowardly night raid. Oyo was being humiliated, its people led into slavery, and the crown was being trampled. "Where is my father?" Sango demanded, his voice thick with smoke. "Oranyan has gone to war to liberate Ile Ife," the Basharan replied. "He left Ajaka on the throne. But your brother is a man of peace, not a man of the sword. He sent emissaries to plead for mercy. They were returned as heads in a basket. Oyo needs a warrior king. Oyo needs the lightning." That evening, Sango hosted the emissaries at his home. His wives, the loyal Oba, and the beautiful, mysterious Osun, tended to the guests. Over gourds of premium palm wine and roasted antelope, the Oyo horsemen marveled at Sango's power. They asked him to recount the legend of his greatest trial, the defeat of the Ibora Imuje, the vampire demon of the Bako swamps. Sango's face darkened as he remembered. Years ago, a strange vessel, a craft of metal and light that had fallen from the stars during the reign of Osiris, had sat half submerged in the murky waters of the Bako River. From that wreckage, a nightmare had emerged. A 9-foot-tall horror with leathery, mottled skin and fangs that could shear through bone. Sango had tracked the beast into a hidden cavern, a place of dripping stalactites and the stench of ancient rock. It moved like a shadow, Sango told them, his voice low. It promised to feast on my marrow, but I invoked the power of Nimrod. I struck it with my battle axe, a clean cut to the neck, ending its 2,000-year reign of terror. But in his pride, Sango revealed a vulnerability. "My thunderbolts," he explained, "are children of the atmosphere. They require the air and the clouds to breathe. In the depths of the earth, in the caves and the mines, I am but a man with an axe." He did not see the subtle shift in the Basharan's eyes. A secret had been given away. A secret that could kill a god. 7 days later, Sango began the long trek back to Oyo. He rode his favorite horse, Ara, a pure white Arabian thoroughbred with muscles like coiled springs. He was accompanied by his family and a small retinue of slaves. They traveled west, away from the rising sun, into the heart of the ancient forests. These woods were haunted places, filled with the ruins of huts once occupied by the witches who had been purged during the Great Cleansing. Now, they were the dens of bandits, and worse. Sango kept his scouts on high alert, but even the best scouts can miss a shadow in the dark. On the second night, as the forest came alive with the eerie hoots of owls and the flickering of fireflies, Sango sat by the campfire with Ayandele. The drummer joked about taking an arrow for his prince. Seconds later, a sharp whiz cut through the air. 3 poison-tipped arrows, fired by Nizari assassins, hired killers from the mountains of Mesopotamia, streaked toward them. Sango's reflexes were supernatural. He tackled Ayandele to the dirt, just as the arrows struck the boulder behind them. 10 curved blades followed, thrown with deadly precision. 3 assassins emerged from the brush, their faces hidden by black hoods. Sango did not reach for a shield. He reached for the sky. He raised his double-edged axe and chanted in a language older than the kingdom. Thunder answered his call. A blinding arc of lightning descended from the canopy, striking the ground with such force that the very trees groaned. When the light faded, the assassins were nothing more than charred husks. Sango looked at their foreign weapons and realized the truth. This was no random attack, he growled. This was a contract. My cousin, King Ajibosin of Owu, has sent the world's most expensive killers to ensure I never reach Oyo. While Sango fought for his life in the forest, the capital of Oyo was a vision of hell. Under the cover of a moonless night, the Owu war chief, Balogun Ogidi, had breached the city walls. They moved like a plague, setting fire to the thatched roofs and cutting down anyone who stood in their path. The screams of women and children filled the night air as the Owu warriors pillaged the markets and the homes of the nobility. King Ajaka, hearing the slaughter from his inner chambers, emerged with his crown held in his hands. He was a man of peace, and the sight of his city in flames broke his heart. He approached the Balogun, who was dripping with the blood of the palace guards. "Why, brother?" Ajaka asked, his voice trembling with grief. "Why destroy your own kin? What is it you truly desire?" The Balogun pointed a gore-stained sword at the king's throat. "There can only be one true ruler in the land of the Yoruba," he spat. "Owu will be the sun, and Oyo will be its shadow. Seize him!" The king of Oyo was bound in heavy iron chains and thrown across a horse like a common thief. By the time the sun rose, the palace was a smoking ruin, and the king was gone. Far to the north, in the palace of Owu, King Ajibosin sat on his throne, sipping palm wine and listening to the reports of his success. He was a man of cunning intelligence, a master strategist who knew that the only threat to his new empire was the prince in Nupe. He had used his finance minister, Oloye Apena, to reach out to the legendary Old Man of the Mountain in the mountains of Babylon to secure the assassins. "If the lightning dies in the forest," Ajibosin mused to himself, "then the world belongs to me." But as Sango crossed the border into his father's lands, his heart was not filled with fear. It was filled with a cold, righteous fury. He looked back at his wives and children, then forward toward the smoking horizon of Oyo. He was no longer just a man, no longer just a prince. He was the storm, and the storm was coming home.
In the beginning, history does not arrive with dates. It arrives as omen.